Hello and welcome to the programme. The Ukrainian authorities are continuing to work on containing a situation at an ammunition depot where a massive fire broke out in Kalynivka in the Dmytro region. Now, rescue teams and military personnel are still working on the scene. Now, some reports cite Ukrainian military officials as saying nearly 70% of the arms arsenal still remains intact. Now, to discuss the situation is Dmytro Shkurko. He's the communications officer of the Ukraine's armed forces. Thank you very much for coming in.
Hi, Tommy.
So firstly, can you give us an update on the latest situation and the response to it?
Fortunately, last explosions were allowed maybe yesterday evening, so that after that all the people evacuated from a sport, they were invited to come back homes. This is a good news, and you know, another good news is that right now the rescue teams and military personnel, they're continuing their efforts to clean the sport from the unexploded ordnance and shells. And so far, this working is continuing. So it's around 934, if I'm not mistaken, personnel involved in that.
Wow,
and
that's incredible size.
Yeah, it's incredible size, and more than 20 units of technique and special equipment involved. So that's working is going on. Right now, everything is stabilized, no explosions, and the work to clean the territory is continuing.
Yes, and no, this particular ammunition depot is one of the largest in Ukraine. And I was surprised actually by how quick the response was, because the fire broke out during the night, if I'm not mistaken, or the early hours of the morning.
No, yeah. It was, to be exact, it was 9:48.
Oh, in the evening, yeah, and then the fire.
In the evening, yeah. So that it was. By the way, it was like a very bright picture how quick the authorities reacted on that incident.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure, but you know, this is not like a secret, because immediately after the first sign of the disaster was appeared, you know, there was immediate report to the duty services, and like in 15 or 20 minutes, all the duty teams, they're already in there. And by the way, during the presidential council, military council called military council yesterday, there was assessment of our chief of defense, who said that because of a very quick and adequate response from the side of personnel, first, the lives were rescued. We know that there were 2 injured women, and we have a great sympathy to them and to their families, but still, there was no killed people.
Yeah, which is surprising, considering the shells that were flying.
This is, if we can say in such circumstances about a good result, it is a good result, because irrespective of disaster that was broken down, no people were dying. You know, and this is a great achievement from the side of authorities. I can say that this is some kind of, you know, evidence of resilience of the Ukrainian society as such, because we're not speaking now about military personnel. We are speaking about the police services. We're speaking about the disaster teams coming on spot. We are speaking about the security services officers who were involved in the controlling the territory and to manage the evacuation. It was a good teamwork, so that I believe that irrespective of dramatic circumstances we are speaking about, it was like one of the good signs that even during such attacks, and there is some evidence that it was an attack, Ukrainian society is ready to respond.
Yeah, and at the moment, I mean, the investigation is still ongoing, and yesterday the General Prosecutor's Office said they were looking into like 4 scenarios. But obviously we can't really comment on the investigation itself because it's still happening. But I mean, you're part of the Ukrainian military. How do they prepare for these, maybe not these sorts of attacks, if it turns out to be an attack? What sort of measures are there in place to make sure that everybody works together?
You know, unfortunately, it was not the first case. Then it was an accident on our depots. And after the previous in Svatovo and Balaklia, there was very tough measures taken, starting from the taking to responsibility the officers who were in charge of the security of that object, and ending by the measures of physical protection of such kind of object. But you know, if we're speaking about the new sophisticated technologies, it's quite difficult to predict what kind of measures will be undertaken by our enemy.
Because, I mean, one of the theories was that it was a drone. And how do you protect a military base from drones? Usually you see the security guards, you know, at the entrance, but actually there's no protection from the skies.
You know, if we're speaking about a drone, it's quite a new challenge. I believe, I'm not a specialist in that regard, but I believe it's a huge challenge because it's very difficult to identify such kind of attack. And more, we know that the measures of radio electronic fight not always are capable to handle that situation, because obviously those drones are, you know, designed not to be vulnerable to,
of course.
to that.
They're very small, very difficult to track.
Sure. So that I believe that is something which should be resolved yet. I'm more than sure that both our military commanders and maybe some of our scientific circles will be looking for a response. But right now I cannot give you the one.
Well, Mr. Shkurko, thank you very much for coming into our studio.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you. And we were speaking to Dmytro Shkurko. He's a communications officer of Ukraine's armed forces. You're watching UATV.